Although liquidity pools and automated market making have been grabbing the headlines, the team behind Vega Protocol started developing their DeFi network for issuing, trading, and settling derivatives contracts back in 2018. With the launch imminent, CEO Barney Mannerings and Delphi Digital's Jose Macedo joined Trustology's Paul Yardley this week to take a closer look at the challenges the industry faces if we're to see these multi-trillion-dollar markets migrate over to these new networks.
Thanks, Tina, and welcome to the DeFi convention. My name is Paul Yardley, and I'm head of software engineering at Trustology. We're a crypto custodian wallet provider. We've just recently launched our DeFi firewall product to help people in the world of decentralized finance. And today I'm joined by a couple of excellent guests who can talk me through some of the interesting things that are going on at the moment there. So I'm joined by Barney Mannerings from Vega Protocol and Jose Macedo from Delphi Digital. So welcome, guys. So Barney, could you talk us through the Vega Protocol and briefly, if you can, the sort of current market layout, how things work and what you're trying to build and how you're trying to open things up?
Yeah, happy to. So I guess the thing we noticed when we started thinking about building Vega was that everything at the time, I guess, a lot of focus was on Ethereum and the Ethereum ecosystem and building on Ethereum. And I have a lot of experience in derivatives and building derivatives marketplaces, but also around the kind of the risk that exists in derivatives and the complexity of those products. And what we realized was that the Ethereum platform, its total sort of power and computationally is about the same as a pocket calculator. And it really just wasn't possible to build high quality, professional standard derivatives products on the Ethereum blockchain. So really what Vega is an attempt to sort of deconstruct derivatives from top to bottom, work out exactly what it is that traders need for capital efficient professional derivatives, and then build a blockchain and a system for trading those as efficiently as possible and in a way that will actually open up kind of the disruption eventually of the sort of legacy centralized derivatives markets.
Excellent. And just to continue on that, Barney, what benefits do you think you're going to give to people who can come on board and see this new protocol? What do you think your clients and you are going to get out of this?
Yeah, so I mean, from the perspective of people using this, there's two major advantages. The first one is if you remove the middleman and you put the network in the control of the participants, then you massively reduce the cost. And trading is a particular example of somewhere where the middlemen are incredibly rent-seeking and they make a very large amount of money, which they extract from the ecosystem. So I think the first thing is you really get a much reduced cost, particularly for smaller players or people who are not close to the kind of financial markets and financial system, but perhaps commercial users of derivatives. And then the second advantage is rapidness of innovation, because effectively to create markets right now, there are bureaucratic, regulatory, and sort of systemic hurdles that make it very difficult and very slow and very expensive to get markets created. It's on the order of months, it's on the order of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to get a market created. You may or may not be successful, and you're at the whim of other people. Whereas with a protocol like Vega, you can literally deploy a proposal for a market and liquidity in sort of hours, really. Obviously, there's a bit more time required to specify and create the market in terms of the kind of the work up front, but the actual process of taking that market live is really, really quick.
That's really interesting. So, Jose, from your perspective, and looking at sort of institutional clients, given what Barney said there, are they looking for that kind of things, and what are they looking for in the DeFi space in general?
Yeah, I think institutional clients are brought in by the pace of innovation that's happening. And they're interested. I think particularly what interests them is the composability aspect of DeFi and the permissionless innovation that it enables. So obviously kind of each tool that's built on DeFi is kind of an open tool that can be leveraged by anyone else that's building and composed together with other tools to build something entirely new. And I think with DeFi right now, we're still at kind of the email phase of the internet, where we're kind of putting things that were previously possible and putting them onto this decentralized infrastructure. Although I do think there are completely new things like flash loans, like automated market makers, which are kind of new and different. But I think what we'll start to see, and especially with stuff like Vega coming online that allows much greater scalability, is that composability allowing us to build things that are completely new. And we're seeing a lot of institutional interest in DeFi. I mean, most of our customers are still crypto-focused funds, but we've seen an increased number of family offices and private investors that are taking an interest in really trying to use and understand this stuff.
So that's interesting. Do you think the sort of larger institutionals are able to benefit from this innovation? Are they able to just move themselves to get on board, or do you think we're still looking at a different class of client who can actually get on board with DeFi?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for the really large institutionals. I think we're starting to see, as I said, more family offices and private investors. I think we're still a ways away from larger institutions. Obviously, custody has kind of been solved, or at least is on its way to being solved by the great work that Trustology and others in the space are doing. But there's still a lot of other kind of barriers, from having to get a wallet to technical risk on smart contracts and kind of a bunch of other things. So I think we're still, in terms of interacting with DeFi, we're still a ways away from the larger investors getting involved. But definitely sort of getting closer and closer. And I think Bitcoin is more likely to lead the way there.
Thank you. So Barney, from your perspective, looking at the technical aspect, there's still a bunch of technical challenges to solve in DeFi and blockchains. And you mentioned Ethereum being the performance or the power of a pocket calculator. So what from your perspective are still the challenges, and how do you think you guys are solving them?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of different challenges, right? And I think some of them come with time, some of them come with kind of the ecosystem development and making things slicker, making things understood, and some of the tools, the kind of things even that people like Trustology are bringing to the ecosystem as well. I think there's a lot to do, between the kind of technical layer, the email of the internet of DeFi, or even the sort of the later protocols of DeFi. There's between that layer and widespread mass adoption, there's lots that needs to be done that's not just technical, but actually sort of ecosystem related. And in terms of technical challenges, I think, the biggest one that we've seen is the performance limitations. So, in order to, for a good example is capital efficiency. In order to have efficient derivatives trading, you need reasonably sophisticated risk algorithms that can be run quite regularly in order to assess the risk of positions and effectively allow people to have a relatively small amount of margin needed to take a position out, because the system is able to sort of quite in a quite sophisticated way as to measure that risk. And whereas on sort of DeFi and Ethereum, the derivatives protocols that exist today have much higher margin requirements and much less capital efficiency because of the that kind of restriction. So really, one of our solutions is to effectively build a blockchain from the ground up for trading and for derivatives, and that gives us a couple of advantages. First, it means we can kind of compile risk them faster, better, and more reusable for markets. But the other advantage it gives us is this kind of sort of idea of vertical integration. So kind of, sort of like what you see people like Tesla or SpaceX or Apple, where they kind of control the whole stack. So if there's something that's ideal, for instance, in trading, it's useful if you don't pay to place an order, you only pay when you trade. You can't do that on Ethereum. You've got to pay gas for every interaction with the chain, whereas on Vega we can actually design the chain to work in a different way so that orders can be placed for free. So really things like that, where we control the entire stack with our chain, we can also kind of prioritize the performance of trading, the capital efficiency, and the risk management.
So that's really interesting. So Jose, over to you. In sense of these technical aspects, how much do you think clients are worried about them, and how much do you think they are just solve it for me?
I think clients are worried about them. The kind of the recent success of Nexus Mutual, I think, is a testament to that. There's a lot of technical risk in a lot of these DeFi platforms, and I think Nexus Mutual has done a good job at addressing that. But there's going to be other solutions that emerge. Most of our clients, even when they're not technical, they do like to dig into the technical aspects and try and understand them. I'd say one of the main focuses, especially given the type of clients that we have, is on the kind of value capture aspect, because what we find with a lot of these DeFi protocols is because they're built in this new way in which everything is open source, permissionless, and therefore forkable, that value capture becomes much more difficult, because you can't just kind of lock other people out and charge a fee. Any kind of excess rent extraction just gets forked away and made cheaper. So DeFi products also really have to innovate in the ways that they capture value, with building kind of network effects that can't be forked. Whether it's kind of community or integrations or liquidity, security, these kind of network effects are what these DeFi products really have to focus on. And it's kind of a different way of looking at a financial product or a business than what they're used to. where kind of regulatory moats exist and stuff, that none of that exists in DeFi. So I think that's what most of our institutionals are spending a lot of time on, is trying to understand the instruments and the ways in which they can capture value and be defensible long term.
So how do you think we, as an industry, we're going to get more institutions to come on board and remove all these hurdles that we've kind of talked about? And also, do you think that some of the, I guess, less honest DeFi protocols are kind of going to get in the way of, they're going to bring down the reputation of DeFi as a platform? So, Barney, on that point, what do you think?
I think depending on which of the sort of the hurdles you're thinking about, there are different solutions to them. And you know, for example, some of the hurdles that we're talking about there will be reputationally solved. So, for instance, simply by having networks and organizations that last for longer and develop a reputational advantage, that will be very, very helpful. And some of that will come from time, but that will also come from things like audits and experience as well. And more people, you know, people like Gauntlet, who are doing a lot of work in analysis of these kind of protocols as well, are very helpful there, because they help everyone to increase their understanding of what's going on. I think there are also things we can do in the protocol layer to help with some of these things. So on the compliance side, there are ways that you can build, you can have kind of permissionless trading, but you can also have kind of constraints on that trading. And that's something we're looking at Vega for a later version of the protocol, is the ability to people to effectively constrain their trading, the matches of their trading to other participants that they're comfortable to trade with based on their kind of compliance requirements. And then, you know, I think the other thing is to help people understand that they're going to get a high amount of value from this. And, you know, depending on the size of the organization, it's harder to convince compliance or easier. But ultimately, when it's cheaper, better, safer, or you can sort of hedge a risk or take a position that you can't do elsewhere. When people see that and they see the value of other people doing that and they see what it means for their business, ultimately people will be very interested and will want to use it. So I think part of this is actually getting beyond the kind of the crypto hype phase, where effectively it's people in crypto spending their crypto on protocols and yield farming and kind of recycling the same money back and forth within the community, getting out of that and actually getting out into the real world and saying, here is how this technology makes trading better, cheaper, more accessible, helps you solve problems you couldn't otherwise solve. And once people see that, they will start to demand it.
Thanks. It was super interesting. So, Jose, on the sort of compliance side, so we've got things like AML and KYC and things like that. How important is that to institutional clients to get all of that sort of solved before they come on board? Or do you think they're prepared to take a little bit of, it's not quite there yet, we'll see how it goes?
I think it is important, but just to touch, I guess, on what Barney said as well, I think real value is the key. You know, creating real value that's not, people aren't going to use these products because they're decentralized, because they're censorship resistant. You know, I think they really have to have architectures that are fundamentally better and more efficient. And a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of obviously less interesting stuff happening with yield farming, and recently there's been a lot of, you know, stuff doesn't make much sense, but there's also been I think incredible successes that we should also highlight, in terms of I can now get better execution on stablecoin trades on a decentralized exchange than I can on a centralized one. You know, I can get better on Curve than I can get on a centralized exchange. Uniswaps has become more efficient than centralized exchanges for various different types of for various trading pairs. So I think those kinds of improvements are what we really need to get people interested, rather than as Barney said, recycling capital, and rather than just kind of pounding the table about decentralization and censorship resistance and stuff. I think when this stuff really gets interesting is when you can encode incentives in a way that eliminates middlemen and makes the systems more efficient.
So I think that's interesting. So as a technical person, some of the things that I find interesting are the decentralization and things like that, and the censorship resistance. But I think what I'm hearing from both of you, Barney, if you want to carry on with this, is it's all about value. You've got to give me a reason to use what you're using. And if you've got censorship resistance, that's kind of like an extra, but you still have to give me value, more efficient markets, more benefits, easier access, faster, quicker. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can take decentralization and censorship resistance from two angles. You can take it from the angle of ideology. And, you know, I suspect many of us here are here because we like it, because we think it is good to have things that are decentralized. It is good to put control in the hands of the users. It is good to have things that are not able to be censored by bad actors or even potentially governments. And there are benefits, and it is good not to enrich those middlemen. So, there's many of the people here are here for that reason, partly. But I also think the other angle you can look at it is to say, well, why, particularly given that many people live in countries that are reasonably free and open and that have markets that are reasonably efficient, why are they going to move, and why is there going to be a shift to something, and does it need decentralization, and how much? And I think the key there is, what does it enable? And what it enables is things like that permissionless innovation. So, I don't need decentralization to trade the euro for the dollar in London, because you can trade that incredibly liquid, incredibly easily in most cases. So do I need decentralization for that? No. But if I want to create a new product, decentralization gives me a unique advantage there. Equally, if I'm in a country that's more up and coming and that doesn't have the same financial infrastructure, and maybe I don't have access to kind of capital markets through my sort of merchant banking relationship, then suddenly this may be the only way for me to access certain hedging products. And the interesting thing about this is, it's only a subset of things that creates value for you. You would not want to go in and suddenly start trying to sweep up the London Stock Exchange and the current liquid FX markets on day one. But the more value it creates for the more different use cases that are not catered for, the more liquidity and the more capital exists within this decentralized network. And liquidity and capital have network effects, which means that once the ball starts rolling and there's more you can do on the decentralized networks than the centralized one, suddenly the friction, it's like a flippening, the friction goes the other way. The friction is, well, why take my money out of this marketplace that has everything and put it into one that has a subset? And so really, this is going to take 5, 10, 15, however many years, but really in the long term, where you get to is that you can do everything that you could do in the centralized markets, in the decentralized ones, and a bunch of other things. And when you need to do something new, you can launch that yourself and you can get that value. And it turns out to be a bit cheaper because you're not paying someone in the middle. And at that point is where things start to flip over, and you now have to, the centralized markets are now losing mind share, and they have to work out how to justify bringing people back in.
Okay, really interesting. Thank you, guys. We've got to end it there. So thank you, Jose. Thank you, Barney. And over to you, Tina.